The creepy side of NEPA. Northeastern and central Pennsylvania's supernatural stories and paranormal places.
Welcome to the creepy side of NEPA. I'm your host, Dan Kosloski. Thank you for joining us here tonight. This is the first time we're actually doing a video podcast. You could still catch us with your normal audio podcast on your favorite podcasting platforms. But this is the first time you're going to be able to watch us with an actual video show on WNEP Plus and also on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Creepy Side of NEPA. And also, as always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, or follow The Creepy Side of NEPA on your favorite podcasting platform. And don't forget to like us on Facebook. That is the best way to always be informed on your latest show information. We have an interesting show in store for you this evening. Joining us again, he's been on the show a few times, is John Walsh, local author and storyteller, part of Haunted Anthracite Tales. And he has a very interesting story to tell us tonight about the Ringtown Witch. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Dan. It's always great to be on the show.
And this is kind of the first time we're seeing each other eye to eye. Usually we're doing this over a phone call.
Yeah, you know what? You're a lot more handsome than I envisioned. So.
You also. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you were telling me the last time we spoke about the story you had about the Ringtown Witch. To be honest, I never even heard of this. A lot of the stories you mentioned before, I heard a piece here or there, but this one, I didn't hear anything of.
Yeah, it's interesting because the last time I was on, I had a chance to talk about the Gordon Mountain Ghost, which is probably one of the most famous tales here in this neck of the woods. Well, second has to be the Ringtown Witch. You know, this is a story that everybody that's local and even beyond is kind of familiar with, and it's quite a tale.
And the last time you're on the show, is that when you did the Gordon Town Ghost? I know we did the Frackville Hex too, right?
I think it was a combination.
Yeah,
we were talking about the hex and tied it into the Gordon Mountain Ghost and the remains. Yep.
So it's all basically in that same area, right?
Yeah, we have quite a bewitched area here down in Schuylkill County. A lot of crazy things going on, I guess.
Well, that's perfect for the show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's right here in our coverage area.
Couldn't be happier living anywhere else.
So what is the story of the Ringtown Witch?
Well, I'm actually going to take you all the way back. Goes back to St. Patrick's Day, 1934, and a little area not far from where I reside, Ringtown. It's a beautiful little valley back there, you know, and it almost has a quality like it's a real life Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Ichabod Crane, you know, going around on a horse and everything. But if you were to go to Ringtown and go back there in March of 1934, there was a woman by the name of Susan Mummy. Now, Susan had quite a reputation in the area. She was said to practice basically hexery, and some people even alluded that she went farther to that and dabbled in the witchcraft. She had a pact with the devil. Now, what the truth is, no one knows.
You said hex running. What exactly is hex running?
Hexery.
Hexery, okay.
Hexery, yeah. It's basically, it comes from the German Dutch, and what they believed was medicinal purposes in nature, you know, various types of herbs and different chants. The book of the book of Moses was a big one with hexery, and it was very common in Pennsylvania for a very long time, and especially in the Ringtown Valley. Many people were said to dabble in it.
I never really heard that title before. It kind of caught my interest there.
Yeah, and it was interesting. You know, a lot of people that were known to be doctors, if you will, in the art they were sought after, you know, and they were looked upon by people to have medicinal purposes for them to help them out. And Susan did have that reputation, but at the same time, she kind of irked people the wrong way. She had what is said to be kind of an abrasive personality, and I think it may have maybe irritated and antagonized people a little bit. But on this particular night in March, she was inside her home in the Ringtown Valley, and she was there with her daughter, Olivia, and she was also with a boarder. His name was Jacob Rice. And what's interesting is Jacob was there. He was about 61 years old, and he had a foot ailment. So he had come home that evening, and he was lying upon the couch. And Susan was in the process of putting on kind of an ointment, you know, to alleviate the pain for Jacob from that day. Just then, her daughter walked in with a small light. And when she had the light, within a second, a huge blast took place. And there was a crash as though the window had broken. And suddenly the light just was extinguished. Well, Jacob and Olivia were horrified. They didn't know what had happened. Jacob actually said that he thought the house had been like dynamited, blown up, and they were scared to move. They motionless, no clue what was going on. All of a sudden, Olivia tried to call out for her mother, and she wasn't receiving a response. So she became very concerned, but the two were just motionless. They didn't want to do anything. So over a couple of minutes, it said that Olivia actually got down and she put her mother's head in her lap, and she could tell that something was wrong with her mom, but she wasn't positive. The two were scared to move. So throughout the night, they stayed put. And finally, around 6 a.m., when daybreak came, they looked down and they could see that Susan Mummy had been killed. She'd been shot.
Oh,
Yeah. So, of course, the manhunt begins. Jacob goes to the nearest neighbor about 200 yards away. And when he does this, the neighbor alerts the authorities. Well, the authorities come, they see that a murder had taken place, and they start their manhunt, trying to figure out who had done this terrible deed. When they started investigating around the home, they noticed that there was a shot blast from the front window that had come in. Well, they start to investigate, and their investigation leads them to a small town, Shenandoah, not far from Ringtown. And they start to look around, and they're told about one man that they believe was in the area that night. Someone had seen his car. So they go up to a home in Shenandoah and they knock on the door. And the man that answers the door is none other than Albert Shinsky. Now, Albert was well known, kind of quiet, a little bit quirky from what I've read about him, but he was taken in for questioning. And at first, he was asked about if he knew Susan. He said yes. But he said he had nothing to do with the murder whatsoever. But that only lasted for about one day. And the reason is he had this smile upon his face. And, the Detective Bueno was his name, couldn't figure out why. And eventually, Albert kind of told the truth. And with a big smile upon his face, he said, I was the one that murdered Susan Mummy.
yeah. The smile on the face is kind of not right to have in that instance.
A little sinister,
Yep.
and that really ties into the story later on. But when they started to ask why, the tale he told just absolutely blew them away. Now, the one thing that's interesting, the tale doesn't begin in 1934 or even 7 years before that. It goes all the way back to 1910. It said that Susan Mummy awoke one morning, and her husband at that time, his name was Henry. Well, Henry worked at a local mill, and Susan just had a bad premonition, like something was going to happen. So she pleaded with her husband, don't go to work. I just have this terrible feeling something awful is about to happen. And he just kind of brushed her off and said, no, 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 everything will be fine. I'm going to go to work. Well, within a couple hours, not far from Mummy's home, there was a huge explosion. And when it was investigated, it was Henry that was in the midst of the explosion. And he was blown sky high into the air and actually landed in an apple tree. I should say bits and pieces of him, because he was killed right then. So word got out about Susan making this prediction, and people kind of latched onto the idea that the woman could see into the future a little bit. Fast forward to March 17th, 1934. The evening she was killed, Albert Shinsky walked up and stood there and was just looking at her. And the reason he was there was one thing: to break a curse, a hex that he believed that she had put on him. 7 years earlier, Albert was actually living right next door to the Mummies with his family. And it said when he was about 17 years old, he was walking out back. He wanted to jump over a fence. And when he jumped over the fence, it broke the fence, and one of the cows went onto Susan's property. Well, she came rushing out and she held up a craggly finger and she said, I'll get you. And she just stared at him. And Albert claimed at that second, he could feel his heart start to palpitate. He had a cold sweat, and he felt like something came over him. And over the next 7 years, Albert made the claim to have just supernatural experiences, all going back to Susan Mummy and this hex. Albert claimed that when he would get home from work, he was a jitney or a taxi driver for the miners. He
Okay.
would be coming home and walking up the steps, and a cat, a black cat with glowing green eyes, would reach out and start to scrape at the back of his calves. So he would run more quickly. In fact, Albert claimed that it happened so often, he would climb outside onto a shed and go into his bedroom window on the second floor in that manner. Well, he solved the first
Well,
problem.
that's odd.
A little bit odd. The family did not own a cat. The second problem was apparently the cat was not satisfied because Albert claimed that he would wake up in the middle of the night and he would hear scratching upon the window. He would look, and it would be the black cat with these glowing green eyes. So of course he would get up and he would become very upset. He could feel the palpitations. He couldn't breathe. He just wasn't himself. Well, over time, Albert even claimed that the black cat made its way into his bedroom, and he would wake up in the middle of the night, and upon his chest would be the black cat. But the cat with its glowing green eyes would be holding him down. And Shinsky even said there were times where the cat would start to laugh, and slowly the face would morph into Susan Mummy's face.
Can you imagine waking up to that?
That'd be a little bit creepy.
It
That
sure
would be a
would
little
be.
bit creepy.
That's pretty amazing. The cat made it inside the house, and it said the face morphed into the human face.
Yeah. And even with Albert, he made the claim over the 7 years, he was unable to basically have any kind of social life. He never slept because this always would take place during the night. So, what do you do when you're going through something like that? You
Yeah,
obviously
so
go
many
to,
options.
no, you go up to Hazelton to a hoodoo doctor. That's the way to go. So, when he went up to this doctor, the doctor came up with a couple possibilities of what he could do to alleviate the symptoms from this curse because he vouched for Albert. He said, absolutely, there is a curse upon you. The first one was to find a stream, strip off all his clothes, and walk upstream, and that would take away the curse. Didn't work. The next one, when the curse came upon him in the middle of the night, Albert would get up out of bed, balance himself on his head up against the wall, and either recite the Lord's Prayer or even say the phrase abracadabra over and over. Shockingly, did not work then. So the third one that he suggested was bleeding. He would actually take little pins and he would prick himself and try to bleed out the curse. But again, didn't work. So eventually, one day, when Albert was walking home, a voice out of the heavens came to him, and it said, there's only one thing you could do. You have to kill her.
This story is pretty wild already.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so that evening, what he did was he went ahead and he fashioned, it was a homemade bullet. It was known as a pumpkin shell. And a pumpkin shell was used to basically hunt big game like bear. So he
Okay.
took a few pumpkin shells, took a 12-gauge shotgun, went out to the Mummy farm and parked maybe about a mile away. Got out on that frigid March night, went up to the window, and he said the whole time he was becoming more and more weak, like the curse was becoming stronger and stronger because old Susan Mummy, knew what was about to happen. Just then, he raised the gun, and right at the right moment, when the girl walked in with the light that he could see clearly, he fired. And when he fired, he struck Susan on the right-hand side by the ribs. It went through her body, basically obliterated her heart, and exited on the left-hand side, and she was killed instantly. And Albert claimed the second he did that, he felt a wave of relief come upon him, and as he was making his way back towards his car, he became almost like gleeful because he knew the curse had been taken away.
I guess that would explain the smile on his face when he was confessing.
Hence the smile.
Yep.
Absolutely. So they go to the jail, and what's interesting is when he was being questioned about this, there were individuals that absolutely vouched for Albert. One in particular was his girlfriend, a young lady by the name of Selena Burstall. Now, Selena was from Monterey City, and she worked, in the area, and she was trying to give money for her boyfriend. And she was very well known to show up at the Schuylkill County Prison and visit Albert. But it was also said that Selena really enjoyed the limelight. She enjoyed the cameras. She liked being on, the newspaper front pages, which it was at this time. And Selena made the claim that while Albert was going through this, she saw the difference in her boyfriend. And there was no doubt that there was a curse upon him. In fact, she claimed that while this was happening, the black cat would also come to her in her house. And she also claimed to look up in the dead of night and see a hooded figure at the edge of her bed. And when she would look closely, she would see the pale face of Susan Mummy staring down at her. Now, please keep in mind, if that's true or not, it's hard to say. Love,
Right.
may take you down the realm of maybe lying for your companion a little bit, but those claims were enough to get Selena on the front page of the newspaper. So she was content with that.
And what
And
year are we talking here? Probably the 30s, you said, right?
1934. This
34.
was,
Okay.
yeah, it was March, and the majority of the newspaper articles came out in late March and early April of 1934. And there's a very famous photograph where Selena, who was only 20 years old at that time, was in the Schuylkill County prison, visiting Albert. And Selena professed to all the reporters that were there that she would marry Albert right now, right then in the Schuylkill County prison, if he would go for it. And Albert decided it wasn't quite the place to do it.
Boy, a lot of interesting stories all go around that prison.
Love the prison. It's I love the stories of the prison. It's
Because
one
I
of my
remember when you were on the show in the
locations to live.
past, you had a lot
What's
of
that?
stories. When you were on the show in the past, you had a lot of stories that were centered around that
Yeah,
prison. And they
yeah.
all
There's
seem to
some.
go back there some point in the story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're always.
Yep.
But it's quite a location. But what ended up happening was with Albert, he went in front of basically a judge, and he had several witnesses come up, both for and against him. And he was, not shockingly, but he was deemed insane, mentally insane. First degree murder was the goal of the district attorney, and he was going to go to the electric chair at this time, but he ultimately was deemed insane. So he was taken to Fairview Insane Asylum, and he spent the next 42 years there.
Wow. That's
Over
a long time.
it is. And over that span, there were several times, almost each decade, he tried to petition that he was mentally fit to go to trial because he was convinced that he would be able to beat the rap, and actually show what had happened was validated. But each time it was shot down. No pun intended, of course.
Right, right,
And
right.
yeah, that was awful. And finally, in 1976, the courts granted that he was going to go ahead and get his trial. So he was brought in and he was questioned. And believe it or not, he was set free. And one of the main reasons why was, number one, they feel as though he had, done his time for the penalty. But number two, everyone that was affiliated with the case was pretty much dead at that point. So in 1976, Albert moved back, of all places, back to the Ringtown Valley and lived until 1983 when he died peacefully in Shenandoah in a nursing home.
Went right back to basically the crime scene.
He did. He did. And, as I said, for the most part, people have said that he was very quiet, didn't say much, didn't really talk about anything. From time to time, he would express regret. But there were some interesting things, paranormal wise, that took place.
I was
So
going to
for
say,
many
did anything
years,
happen to anybody else except him with the witch?
yes, there was, in fact. In fact, the people that claimed that they also had experiences and vouched for him claimed they had a curse put upon them as well. In fact, 3 citizens in the local area claimed that Susan had done the same thing, and they had had experiences as well where they would be short of breath. They would see a black cat. It's always a black cat with the piercing green eyes. And, Susan had a track record. Beforehand, the land that she called her home she did not own the land. So she was going to be evicted several times to the point where the police would come and evict her and her family, get rid of all the belongings and everything. But within a few hours, she would just move right back. She would go back to the same spot. It became so frequent that the owner of the property and the police agreed the only way to get rid of her was to burn down the house. So they ended up burning down the original house. And, they figured their problems were taken care of.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, Susan came back with a tent, and she set up a tent so that she could actually stay on the grounds. And eventually another house was erected, and she just stayed there.
Wow.
But
I wonder what it was with the grounds that she wanted to stay there so bad.
I don't know. I don't know. There could have been something there. And even with Shinsky, he lived right next door, and they knew each other for a long time. Even Jacob Rice knew Shinsky, but Shinsky was adamant that the woman was a witch, and he would see her doing odd things around the farm. The people who vouched for him claimed they had the same experiences. In fact, one man made the claim that he had to go down over to Susan Mummy's home, and he went down into the cellar. And when he was down in the cellar, he was looking around. He had to do some kind of errand. And
Mhm.
he claimed that he found little mason jars. And inside the mason jars were little baby pigs, little piglets that Susan would use to cast hexes and curses. Now, his claim was just when he found them, Susan came down the stairs and he was horrified. He didn't know what to say
Yeah.
to her. And of course, he played it off as though he had seen nothing and she banished him from out there. But another claim I heard was one person in the area actually claimed to see her transform into a pig. Now, again, very extreme, possibly hyperbole with that kind of stuff,
Right.
but the claims are there, true or not. It's, supposedly they validated Shinsky's claim.
And this story has a little bit of everything, it sounds like.
It does. It does. And people have even claimed after Susan Mummy was killed that if you went to the home, you would still be able to see blood appear on the ground where the woman was killed and bled out. They also claim to see bloody handprints, actually show up on the walls of the home that she used to call. And of course, walking throughout the grounds, people have claimed that they actually saw Susan Mummy after her death walking the grounds of the area. So hard
Even
to say.
after death, you still couldn't get her off those grounds, it sounded like.
She was a stubborn woman. I like her style. Very stubborn, but yeah, Shinsky was pretty adamant, and he spent 42 years, in an insane asylum for it. And the crazy thing is, over the years, the home that Susan Mummy called her home, there were several arson attempts. Now, Albert Shinsky was let out in 1976. The house was pretty much burned to the ground at one point in 1980. And of course, there were claims that started to come out that it was indeed Shinsky doing it. Now, I've also read claims that the house eventually was just torn down because the arson attempts were so bad. But the question is, who was doing the arson attempts and why?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Especially so many years after basically everything wrapped up.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Now, the picture you showed before, was that Shawinski?
Yes. So if I
If we could pop
show
it
you
right
right
up
here,
there.
that's Shinsky right there. And Albert Shinsky, as I said, he was about 24 years old, the murder. That photograph was taken in the Schuylkill County Prison. You can tell by the background. And Shinsky, one thing about him was he was described as a normal prisoner when he was in the Schuylkill County Prison, jovial and gleeful. In fact, he actually gained weight because for many years, a hoodoo doctor told him the only sustenance he can have because of this curse was unpasteurized milk, right from a cow.
Yeah.
Once he went into prison, he started eating 3 meals a day, and he
He
was
was
just
probably happy to get away from it.
he was just beside himself. He felt like a rejuvenated man. Whether it was indeed the insanity or if the hex had been broken, he was a completely different person.
Now, was he the same way once he got out? I'm assuming he was still good once he got
Uh,
out, he didn't go back to his old ways?
no, from what I understand, he led a very quiet life once he actually got out in 1976. At that time, obviously he was in advanced stage. Um,
Sure.
1983, he was put in a nursing home for good. But when he was sent to the Fairview Insane Asylum and he was actually diagnosed, a form of dementia was diagnosed and also schizophrenia. Now, I think that's pretty significant because he had a brother who soon after the murder also he was a little bit older than Albert, but he also was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And he had situations where he believed he was actually on fire inside his body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's quite a family, quite a
Yeah.
quite a story.
Sounds like an interesting family for sure.
How how about those Thanksgivings sitting around the table? Must have been
Oh, I just
interesting.
imagine the stories.
Yeah, yeah.
So this was one of the stories that sort of passed down in the area, huh? This Ringtown Witch.
Yeah, Gordon Mountain was always number 1. Second was always, the Ringtown Witch over in Ringtown. And in this neck of the woods, it's very well known. Even when it happened, it was nationwide news, and, it still is. Every once in a while, you'll see it pop up, along with York with the Hex Hollow murders. That's a big one,
Mhm.
but the Ringtown Witch is a very popular story in this part of the woods.
It seems like hexes and stuff, that's sort of a trend in your neck of the woods there.
It is. Hexes, curses, evil eyes, very, very popular, especially in the 1800s, early 1900s. Now, please keep in mind when Shinsky went down to Pottsville, I mean, obviously he was ostracized by the people down there. Uh, I guess north of the mountain, we believe in that stuff a little bit more. But if you continue south down into Berks County, very well known, for their hexerai and witchcraft.
Yeah, so it seems like the more south you go, the bigger it gets.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Pennsylvania, we have some quirky things going on.
Oh, I've told you many a times, I'm sure, since I started the show. I'm amazed at the amount of stories in this area.
Oh, there's a lot. There's a lot. And it's amazing. Even now, I've been doing this, like actually researching this kind of material for about, God, I'd say about a decade now, seriously. And I'm coming upon new stories all the time. And even with the witches, I mean, this is just one story. I know of at least 4 or 5 just in the immediate area around here that, go along with the whole hexerai, evil eye, witchcraft theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like every so often, like I get a little bit of a dry streak. I can't find a story. I can't find anyone for the show, but then I uncover one that's so wild. I'm just amazed that I never heard of it before.
I'll tell you what, I think you're doing pretty good, Dan. The material
I
you
try
have on
my
here is
best, but every so often I get a dry
yeah,
streak there.
yeah. It's, and, honestly, the one thing that happens, and I remember speaking with you a couple years ago about this, sadly, storytelling and just people communicating that way, it's kind of fading away, and the
Yeah,
stories
true.
are being lost, so with the Ringtown Witch, uh, I guarantee a lot of the youth in the area are unfamiliar with it, but, like it or not, it's part of our history here in Schuylkill County, and like I said, even in the state of Pennsylvania, it's a big one.
All these stories are part of the history, and they're ones nobody ever heard of a lot of times.
No,
And you're living right in
no.
the area where they happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true, and even last time I was on, we were talking about the Gordon Mountain Ghost. I never knew of the connection with Frackville, and that's my hometown, where
Right.
supposedly there was a grave of a young lady that was the victim of the murder at Gordon, and she was buried in Frackville. I had never heard of that story up until a year ago.
Yeah, you just keep uncovering stuff that you never knew before. And like I said, I'm amazed all the time when I come across these stories that I'm like, how did I not hear of this before?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. There's some great stuff out there.
Well, once again, you had a great story for us tonight. You
Thank you.
never let us down when you come on the show. That's for sure.
Oh, I try. It's always wonderful to be on your show. I think you're doing such a wonderful job, and I know I've spoken to people that they love the content and the show that you're putting out there. So we appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on again.
You're my pleasure. Anytime.
Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you for listening and watching The Creepy Side of NEPA. Once again, if you have a story or maybe you have an idea for an upcoming episode, give us an email. Our email address is ghost@wnap.com. And until next time, enjoy The Creepy Side of NEPA.